Absolutely.
Made a promise he couldn't.
Yeah, let me know.
Okay.
Woo! Good morning, Facebook. My name is Sagar Anjetti. This is my colleague Kevin Daly. We are coming at you live from the Daily Caller News Foundation. This is Alternative Facts, episode 12. Before we begin, Kevin and I have a very special request of you both. We would like you to check in with your location. Let us know where you're coming from.
Let us know if you're a deplorable.
Let us know if you're a deplorable. That's actually the key. I'd particularly like it if you're deplorable X checking in from so-and-so so I can make sure to tailor my show specifically for you. So please let me know. We're going to begin with DACA. DACA. So what the hell is going on, Kevin? What's going on?
So the president is, I'm sure our viewers know at this point, announced this week that if Congress does not pass legislation to provide for the legalization of individuals who were brought to this country illegally as children, then he will rescind an Obama-era directive that effectively extended a temporary amnesty to children who were brought to this country illegally.
Right, so that's what the president is doing. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at what the media says that the president is doing?
The vast majority of American people and the people I speak to are appalled by the actions that have happened recently. And yes, you're right. And I asked the question at the beginning of the show, what does this say to Americans of color? It says, again, what you said, you're not wanted. And I can speak to that. And I spoke to it during the election. A lot of people were upset about when I came out and talked about the president after the David Duke comment, after the speech he gave in Minnesota that he said wasn't, that one of his advisors sat here on the program and said wasn't a speech about race when it was touted as a speech about race. This whole gaslighting that's come to so many issues, especially racial issues in this country, it's so obvious. It's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's just flat out bias, flat-out discrimination that they're touting coming from this White House.
Basically what happened is that President Trump ended a program which is probably unconstitutional. We'll get back to that in a little bit. And you would have thought that Trump is kicking 800,000 people out of this country illegally. The International Rescue Committee called it inhumane, likened it to a Syrian genocide. I mean, this is insane. Well, first of all, let's start with the legal argument, obviously, because we are a country of laws, despite what people would like you to think. So, okay, break that down for us.
There's a very good argument that DACA, as President Obama promulgated it, is not lawful for several reasons. In the first place, this is effectively a regulation, and when the administration issues a regulation, it has to follow a law called the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires regulations to conform to certain expectations. One of them is, if you're going to pass a regulation, you need to establish what's called a notice and comment period before you promulgate that regulation. You have to let all interested, in the first place, you have to let people know that you are going to institute this regulation. And then you have to invite comment on that regulation before you promulgate it. That didn't happen during the, when DACA was issued, and that's not even in dispute. And then there's also a constitutional argument, which is simply this, that Congress in 8 U.S., I believe it's 8 U.S.C. 1225, has clearly established that individuals who are in this country unlawfully are to be removed, period. You had the Obama administration, which sets aside this piece of legislation and issues its own guidance that expressly contradicts what Congress has codified in law. And this is important because the Constitution's Take Care Clause requires that the president faithfully enforce and faithfully enforce and carry out the laws that are passed by Congress. President Obama, in the view of many people, did not do that here. So there are two arguments. There's a constitutional argument, and then there's this Administrative Procedure Act argument. But the arguments against DACA, from a legal perspective, are quite strong. And its parallel program, DAPA, was stopped by the federal courts during the Obama administration. So the idea that you can just kind of bulldoze over these important legal arguments is ridiculous, and you see almost no coverage of these important points in the media.
Absolutely zero coverage.
None.
The word I hear from all of them, it's obviously a coordinated campaign, they knew this was coming, is that this is an inhumane and cruel decision. Do you want to know what's cruel? President Obama giving 800,000 people false hope with something that he admitted is a temporary stopgap measure, turned it into a 5-year-long law, effectively legalized and integrated almost 1 million freaking people into the economy. And then a president comes in who decides he's going to enforce the law, and that's inhumane and cruel? I mean, come on.
Think about the scope of the promise that President Obama made to this population, with whom I think most people have sympathy.
Sure, most people are like, should we kick them out? Yeah, probably not.
Sure.
But if they're going to stay, they have to stay legally, and that only comes through an act of Congress.
But these so-called dreamers, because of DACA, were given access to all sorts of benefits. They can apply for home loans. They get a work permit. They share private information with the government. President Obama's administration encouraged them to do this on the basis of a promise that they could not keep. And President Obama's moral culpability in this very difficult situation has not at all been discussed.
Giving you something that makes you feel good, but doing it illegally, and then calling the guy who enforces the law inhumane and cruel is legitimate insanity.
True.
And that's all that we've seen here. But what it really is a full-scale media narrative geared towards a full-blown amnesty for most illegals.
Right.
And I think the place that we saw that most clearly was in an Associated Press story. Now, I'm sure that the Associated Press did not mean to do this, but it's a slip of a tongue, kind of a Freudian phrase that perfectly illustrates the way that these people think about these things. So, Kevin, tell us what happened.
The Associated Press ran a story that about DACA that used the phrase undocumented citizens to describe dreamers, i.e. to describe people who entered this country unlawfully. Now, there's a lot of debate as to the nomenclature surrounding these terms. Should you say illegal immigrants?
Even if you accept undocumented. Let's accept undocumented.
Accept undocumented. The idea that these people are citizens is, that's a whole separate universe of assertion. I mean, that's not even in evidence.
Exactly.
And it's difficult to know what to make of that. I'm sure it was a mistake. I doubt that the writer of that AP Wire story was making some kind of ideological claim, but wow, what a revealing mistake.
It's just the way, exactly. It's revealing into the mindset of these people. These people want you to believe that just because you're an undocumented person does not preclude you from citizenship whatsoever. And they're not waiting for an act of Congress. They want to refer to you as a citizen right now. They want to disregard the law. They want to make it so that we're constantly arguing about, like, oh, no, immigrant. And one of my favorite things that these people do is that they will group in, undocumented or illegal immigrants in terms of immigrants as a total population, right? So they'll be like, immigrants added X% to GDP. And I'm like, guys, it's not that simple. It's like...
What else is really interesting here is the AP's apparent willingness to extend a concept of citizenship or participation in society to a group of people who are not legally citizens. So it's sort of like the AP is operating off of this assumption that the concept of citizenship or the context of participation in the culture extends to people who lawfully are not members of our republic. And so that creates this interesting in-group and out-group dynamic. And so you say, okay, so this incredibly sympathetic population, for which I'm sure people feel a lot of empathy, are citizens, are participants in the country. What about Trump voters?
Okay,
Would you lump them into the same category? Are they lawfully citizens but not really participants in the society?
That's the way we see it.
There are really interesting kind of principle clashes that are taking place.
I'm glad you put it that way, because the thing is, this is about cultural citizenship. They're like, these people, are worthy of our empathy, of elite empathy, and ergo they are a citizenship of my America. And you hear this all the time. You hear, that's not the America I grew up in. That's not the America I know. America is a legal entity.
Have you heard this before?
No,
that's not who we are.
Yeah, that's not who we are. Well, it's like, no. Who we are is people who reside by a code of law in this country. We disagree with each other on a lot. But you can't just, you can't just refer to some people as like, oh, these people are part of America. And you're like, well, they don't have citizenship. And they're like, no, but they're part of it.
Really fascinating dynamics.
It is interesting. And I'm sure you guys see this all the time in terms of the media's coverage. It's just this constant narrative that's being thrown into your face about the benefits of immigration. If you even discuss crime rates or like, welfare recipients, et cetera, you're a bigot, automatic bigot. It's like, it's this PC culture that surrounds this discussion that just makes it so you can't have any rational debate.
Yeah. Speaking of labels.
Oh, okay. Yes,
how about
please.
The New York Times?
Lead us into this. All right. So we're going to switch gears a little bit from DACA. I know you guys love to read about it. Yes, it was. And so we're going to go to the trial of the century. Some are calling it. Many people are calling it.
Many people are saying.
Which is,
I am saying.
Yeah, I'm saying it's the trial of the century. So the trial of the century is Democratic Senator Bob Menendez on trial. We've got a few stories. Nobody's really covering it because I don't think people really want to reckon with the fact that a guy who was supposed to be one of the most respected members of the U.S. Senate is incredibly corrupt.
Right.
So, Kevin, what the hell's going on?
So the New York Times did a piece on Senator Bob Menendez's trial for corruption in the federal court in New Jersey. Left out kind of an important detail, though.
What was that detail?
Well, he's a Democrat.
Yeah.
He's a Democrat, and somehow in all of its copies, the New York Times didn't mention that it's a Democrat, that he's a Democrat.
What's worse?
Our colleague Peter Hasson noticed this and wrote a story about the New York Times overlooking this kind of key detail that's important for reasons we can discuss in a moment. And after this story, the New York Times, as it often does, and this we could do our own show
They do it all the time.
They did what's called a stealth edit. So they went in, they edited the article, but when that happens, you're supposed to include a note at the bottom of your story, or maybe even at the top, depending on how scrupulous you are about this sort of thing, that this copy has been edited since it was first published. The New York Times didn't do that. In other words, they snuck in the fact that Menendez is a Democrat after they originally excluded
After
it.
widespread condemnation from here. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Did the guy mean to do it? Probably not. Was it willful exclusion? But it's the things that you choose not to cover. It's the things that you choose not to include which are the most important and revealing of the insidious mindset.
And the fact that he's a Democrat is actually very important to this story.
Why is it important?
If he's convicted, he's probably going to have to resign. There's no law that says a convict can't be a senator, but he's probably going to have to resign. This is important because if there is a Senate vacancy in New Jersey, then the senator, temporary senator, is appointed by the governor, who happens to be Chris Christie, who happens to be a Republican.
There we go.
And all of a sudden, if this, if in fact Menendez is convicted, there's a good chance that there will be another Republican senator in the upper chamber of Congress, and that matters because Republicans in the Senate need every single vote they can get their hands on to do tax reform, to do immigration, and maybe even a healthcare redux.
Exactly.
And so we know that there are, at least there are 52 Republicans in the upper chamber. There are 2 who are very moderate, willing to buck the party, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins.
Right.
Bringing on one more Republican stalwart
That's a big
could break the
deal.
logjam. Right, and so the fact that Menendez is a Democrat could, and if he has to leave the Senate, that dramatically changes the political calculus.
Exactly.
And so this is an important detail that you can't.
These are details that they overlook, that they hope that you guys won't notice, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring the shroud from the media. These not willful, but Freudian slips are something that tells us everything you need to know about them, and that's exactly what we try and do here for you guys. So, Sagar and Jetty, Kevin Daly, Daily Caller News Foundation Alternative Facts. Remember, if you haven't checked in already, please check in. Please check in right now.
Check in now.
Yes. Thank you. We love you.